Several years ago, I wrote a book called You're Not Going Crazy, You're Just Waking Up. And that's probably been the most popular title in terms of the actual title of the book, because a lot of people can really relate to the idea that sometimes when you're on the spiritual path, you could just assume you must be going crazy because you begin to question so many things about your reality, or better said, your former realities. So several years ago, I wrote You're Not Going Crazy, You're Just Waking Up, subtitled The 5 Stages of the Soul Transformation Process. Because even though the title is to relate to people and to sort of connect with them on a level that they might be feeling when they're going through the life process, it really is better titled, or more appropriately titled, The 5 Stages of the Soul Transformation Process, because all of us, the number 5 is such a sacred number and explains so many things. It's so complete. In a sense, it represents the 4 human chakras or centers of the body and the 1 collectively of the upper 3 in the head and neck. So we use the idea of the 5 as a sacred number because it seems so complete. For example, the 5 fingers on our hands, 5 toes on the foot, and the 5 limbs of the body counting the head. So it sort of has a sacred geometry, the star that represents like the Da Vinci Man, right? So I wrote a book called You're Not Going Crazy, You're Just Waking Up, partly to help relate to folks that were attending so many workshops, lectures, services at churches and so forth, that were asking questions during workshops saying, what is happening to me and why is it happening? What do I do now? Why is it that I got on the spiritual path, my life seems to sort of fall apart? What's going on and what do I do about it? So I was explaining to folks time after time, well, there's actually a method to the madness. Some of us might be familiar with the 5 stages of grieving, for example, like denial and so forth, and then acceptance eventually. Well, it's like that. There's a natural 5 stages of the soul transformation process, meaning anytime you go through a change in your life, I'm referring to it as a soul transformation process. Sometimes they might seem relatively innocuous, sometimes relatively major to us, but there's 5 general stages. If we can understand what stage we're in, where we've been, in other words, what stages we've gone through, which stages we're in, and then we can better anticipate what stages we're going to. So that always helps us. It's like having a map for life. Especially valuable when we're going through the soul transformation process, meaning any changes in our life. So generally we're going to go through these 5 stages, and they are that something's going to change in your life eventually. You're going to feel some sort of what I call dismantling. Now, who's doing the dismantling and what's doing the dismantling? Some people are going to say it's God. Some people are going to say it's astrological configurations are forcing this upon you. Some people are going to say fate, karma, your next door neighbor, whatever it happens to be, depending on what's befalling you. And what I'm suggesting is that nothing happens by chance, by accident, or coincidence. It's happening because your soul is saying basically, I want you to grow back into who you really are. You're a divine being. You have forgotten. I somewhat remember, I meaning the soul, somewhat remember, and I'm going to do everything in my power to get you, the human part of you, to remember and come home. One way to look at it is sort of to say, it's sort of like saying the soul is saying, I want your life to be more divine. That way you're more divine, which is what you really are. So I want your life to be more spiritual, more divine. So I'm going to do what I can to make your relationships become more purified, your health, your vitality, your consciousness more purified. And to do that, it's going to put you through tests to get you to that place. Well, sometimes when we're not quite getting it and getting on board with those tests, the soul's going to say it's time for a change. You're not quite getting it, so we need to pull the rug out from your old life. It's referred to in some scriptures as you have to lose your life to gain your life. So even though we resist it and we see all forms of death as generally negative for most people, they're really an opportunity for a rebirth, like the phoenix that ascends from its own ashes. It's a purging of the old and ascending into a new level of consciousness. So in the You're Not Going Crazy, You're Just Waking Up book, we talk about the 5 stages and explain really thoroughly, yet concisely, that there are 5 stages. First, you're going to go through a stage of dismantling, or something's going to seem to dismantle you. Remember, it's really your soul doing the dismantling. Secondly, after you feel dismantled, you're going to go through a period of relative emptiness. It might be thought of as a depression or sadness or a grieving stage because something's changed. You've lost something. It could be the loss of a loved one. It could be the loss of an object in your life that might have been valuable to you. It could be the loss of a job, but some sort of change is going to happen. And it's inevitable because any part of our life that has become stagnant, maybe not serving our highest good, the soul is going to say, well, how do I get you to a higher divine state of consciousness when you're still obsessed on or living in the old state of consciousness? And it says basically, I'm summarizing or making it a bit simplistic, but it'll say I have to get rid of the old to get you to the new. That way you're not fixed on it. So it's going to create a dismantling. We're going to go through a bit of a, it's almost like an emotional or an ego tantrum. I feel really bummed, I'm sad, I'm just empty. And after a period of emptiness, generally you're going to come to a period of disorientation, kind of like, I thought I had this, I thought I was this, I thought this was in my life, I thought this was of value, and then I go through the depression of it being gone. Well, after that, you're going to go into a disorientation. It's like saying, well, now what am I? Where do I go from here? That's disorientation. Even the words can belie the idea that you're saying, I'm disoriented. After disorientation, the good news and bad news is that most people will simply go right back to where they started, meaning I'm a little disoriented. Now I'm starting to get panicked because when I'm disoriented, I feel like I'm not in control. And if I'm not in control, I become very panicked and I need to pull something into my life. It's almost like an addictive behavior. I need to pull something in my life to compensate for the thing I lost. So if I lost a relationship, I'm often going to just recreate another relationship to replace the last one. But coming from that rash place, I can't do a very good job creating a better kind of a relationship. It's like Einstein telling us you can't really repair problems with the same mind that created them. So we find ourselves going rashly back to the beginning, trying to fabricate a new job, yet another relationship, but not with much more integrity than we had with the last one, not much more heightened consciousness than with the last one. So we find ourselves going again into emptiness, disorientation, becoming panicked, running back and doing it again and again. And this is, in a sense, this is one of the major cycles Buddha was trying to describe, that we go around and around in the human stuff. Well, the good news is that to get there, that there is another option. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 stages, you can cross a bridge and get to stages 4 and 5, but there is a bridge. And that bridge you could say is humility or surrender, an attitude of surrender, but there is something that has to happen. You do have to understand, I do not want any of the life from the past. I am ready for, and in fact, I have to insist on having a new life. I cannot any longer do the old life. It doesn't work. It probably never did. So what we get to is a place of surrender. And we say, help me. And that's calling upon a higher power. Crossing that bridge of surrender and humility brings us to stage 4, which is rebuilding, and stage 5, a new life. So instead of recreating the old and having it fall apart, we find ourselves rebuilding a new life. That's what You're Not Going Crazy really is about. The 5 stages of the soul transformation process is about. In the book, you basically get each chapter even gives you a bit of a prayer, like ideas of a prayer that you can use through each stage, and exercises to be used so that you can most effectively and efficiently get through each stage. And again, I used the title, You're Not Going Crazy, because so many people felt that not only that when they get on the spiritual path, they feel like something's got to be wrong because things tend to go topsy-turvy, but it's because the old life is being taken away so that we can more fully experience the new life that we got on the path for. But also, when we get on the spiritual path, a lot of times this human world will actually try to imply that we are crazy. We're crazy for questioning our old life. We're crazy for even considering allowing it to be dismantled. We're crazy for not getting rashly back into any old relationship. How many women have had girlfriends or guys have guy friends who say, man, you really need to get out there and date, not realizing you haven't even reached a new level of consciousness to have a healthier relationship you had before. They'd rather you just get something going. And that's this world trying to encourage the same old, same old. Some people will say, you're crazy to question your job, you're lucky to even have one. Rather than, wow, that really makes sense because I think we all have a soul's purpose, and I wish I were like you, courageous enough to say goodbye to the old job and look forward to a new one. But this world is crazy, and we already were crazy. We're not going crazy, we were crazy, and instead we're now waking up. And we can now learn to rebuild a new life. How could that be anything remotely as bad or worse than the life we already had. Clearly, it's the only choice. It's the best choice, but it's the only choice. It's like we settle for nothing else. It's time for me to get over the bridge and start rebuilding a new life, and that has to be done with God.